Hey, I'm Lyndall. I'm a counselor, a self-discovery coach, and creator of the Proactive Needs and Boundaries method. And today I want to share with you what I've learned over the many years of working with a multitude of clients about the top 5 reasons that boundaries fail. Because I think you'll be surprised as to what I've discovered. And if you're interested in finding out about why we do the things that we do, then hit that subscribe and notification bell as I put out like new videos on self-discovery and all different topics every Monday. So, are you ready? Let's dive in and let's start the countdown. And if you stay to the end, I'll walk through some ways that we can solve some of these top 5 issues. All right, let's do it. Number 5. You're using borrowed boundaries that aren't your own. Okay. Maybe you've picked up phrases from social media, from podcast books, friends, they all sound good. My boundary is this, or if they do this, I'm done. I should walk away. But, when those words never came from your own body, from your own values, then they're ideas that you've tried on rather than your own truths that you've discovered. So, the moment that someone pushes back on that boundary, your nervous system doesn't back you because you feel, wobbly, you might over explain things or justify it or backtrack because, when your boundary is just a sentence that you copied and not something that you actually uncovered yourself, it's going to fold the moment that someone leans on it. Yeah. Because a boundary has to be yours. So, number 4, this is quite common, right? You think you've set a boundary, but you've never actually set it or defended it. Yeah, I can see some of you cringing with this one. And, this could be something that you've vented about to your friends. You might have journaled about it. You've replayed the conversation over and over in your head 100 times. You might have even pulled back, right? Or gone a bit cold in that situation, but you haven't actually looked that person in the eye and said, this doesn't work for me, or, I need this instead. And unfortunately, a boundary that only exists in your head is like it's a wish, it's a hope, it's a dream. Yeah. Until it's spoken clearly, at least to yourself and ideally to the other person, it's not a boundary. It's more of an internal monologue. Yeah. So number 3, you're using boundaries as avoidance and punishment. And we see so much of this in social media at the moment, that whole culture of protect your peace. And, the message out there is that if someone upsets you, cut them off, disappear, ghost them, etc. And don't get me wrong, right? Sometimes walking away is absolutely the healthiest and safest thing that we can do. And, I'm not talking about abusive situations here. I'm talking about everyday relationships where you can default to the stance of, you crossed a line, so I'm out. And, in that situation, you never actually came out with what you need, or you've never given the other person a chance to respond. And in those moments, what we're calling a boundary is actually avoidance because we're dodging the discomfort, we're dodging any possible conflict that could arise by not communicating. Because when we think about it, a real boundary is information, and it's a signal that you have unmet needs that are either being ignored or they've never actually been addressed, right? But when we use boundaries as walls to control, to punish, they don't create safety or change. They just create distance, and they can create this whole lot of confusion around expectations and ultimately separation. Two more to go. Are you hanging in there with me? Hopefully you're not too triggered, but mind you, triggers a good thing. So, keep an eye on those if you are. My number two reason is you don't understand your boundary signals. Okay. Now, in my work, I talk about the four stages of boundaries, and that's from, the first little trigger all the way through to an absolute deal breaker. And I'm not going to unpack the whole framework here because that's something I go deep into in my client sessions. But basically, this is what usually happens, right? Most people only notice themselves at that later stage. And what happens in that space is by the time they speak up, they're already at a hard boundary or a deal breaker in some cases. And, inside they're saying, I'm done. I'm absolutely done with this. But from the outside, it looks like they've exploded, they've lost their shit out of nowhere. Yeah. And the thing is, if you miss your early signals, you're only ever going to hear yourself when you're screaming. So, what does that mean? Well, that doesn't mean you don't have any boundaries. It just means that you're not understanding all the little signs and triggers that lead up to that boundary violation, that lead up to that, explosion when you get to that point where you've just had enough. Yeah. And they're the critical things that we need to look out for. So, the number one, the biggest reason your boundaries keep failing is that you don't actually know what your boundary is protecting. And it's like trying to hold a line, but you haven't named what the need is underneath it, you know? So, like, is this boundary protecting a deal breaker? Is it protecting a core emotional need, a value? It could be protecting your energy or your capacity or even your physical safety. And if you can't answer that in detail, the boundary is going to feel shaky. It's going to feel negotiable, or just too extreme. Like, yeah, why am I doing this? You know what I mean? So think of it this way, right? If it's safe to, close your eyes for a minute and imagine that you've been told to build this huge fence and guard it with your life, but nobody tells you what's inside that fence. And you might sit there and say to yourself, well, is it my home? Is it just some random paddock? Is it a toxic dump? Is it a playground? Is it a gold mine? What is it? Because if you didn't know, you would constantly second guess yourself by asking questions like, do I let this person in? Is it worth defending? Or am I overreacting to what I'm protecting? Yeah. And that's kind of what it's like trying to hold boundaries when you don't actually know what they're protecting. You've built this fence, but you haven't decided what lives inside it. So you don't really have a boundary problem. You have a clarity of needs problem. So let's recap. Yeah. Your boundaries might be failing because number 5, you're using borrowed boundaries instead of your own. Number 4, your boundary only lives in your head and has never been clearly said or defended. Number 3, you're using boundaries as avoidance or punishment instead of honest communication. Number 2, You don't understand your early boundary signals, so you only notice them at breaking point. And the number one reason is you don't actually know what your boundary is protecting in the first place. And you know what? If you're listening to this thinking, yep, that's me. I don't actually know what my boundaries are protecting. I just know I'm exhausted all the time and I feel resentful. Then this is where, the needs work comes in, because your boundaries are only ever going to be as strong as your self-discovery is. And, here's the secret that most people don't understand. If your boundaries keep failing, you don't magically need more willpower. You just need clarity. It's as simple as that. You just need clarity. And that's why I designed my 4 Pillars of Needs course, especially to help people with this. And it's over 20 self-paced modules where we map out what truly matters to you and how you show up in relationships. And it's really the groundwork, right? So that when you're doing that boundary work in the future, you actually know what matters to you and what each boundary is protecting. So, if that's the kind of support you need, you'll find the description and um, in the below, you'll find the link in the description below. Couldn't get my words out then. Or, just email me the word pillars and I'll send you through all the details for it. But you know what? If you're not ready for that, that's okay too. Just rewatch the 5 reasons and start by getting really honest. Honest about which one is really playing out for you right now and start in that space. Because the clearer you are on who you are and what you need and what you will and won't stand for, the less dramatic and confusing your boundaries become. And if this was helpful, hit like so I know to make more of these types of videos. And please feel free to share it with someone who keeps saying I have boundaries, but still seems to be, exhausted and resentful all of the time. And if you want if you want more support with your own needs and self-discovery, I'll put all the links of how you can work with me below. So hope that helped, guys. I will see you next week with a new video. Take care. Bye.